Welcome to Couch Catechism. I'm your host, Michael Obeid. We've got a very special presentation today. We've got two teachers that I've asked to come on the show. I've got Melissa and I've got Vince from Mary McKillop at Wakely. Welcome, guys, to the show.
Hi, Michael.
Thank you
for having us.
No problem. Guys, today we are going to be speaking about the Sacrament of Marriage, and we're doing this especially for the Year 9, the Year 10 program. So let's get started. But before we do, guys, if you're watching this, and you're watching it on Facebook, can you please like and share it? If you're also watching it on YouTube, can you please like and share it also? And subscribe to the channel Veracis Media. So let's get started first of all. Okay, so the topic of marriage, it's within the Year 10 syllabus. And I've got some questions that I've lined out for you guys. So first and foremost, what is marriage? Who wants to start us off?
Vince can take this one.
Yeah, so marriage is a lifelong faithful partnership between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
It's ordered towards, so what we mean by ordered toward, it's made for the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. Marriage is indissoluble, which basically means it can't be destroyed, and it lasts until literally death do us part. So at the moment of death, the marriage ceases to exist.
Okay, cool. So you said a couple of very interesting things there, so I just want to maybe elaborate on some of that.
Yeah.
So you said, first of all, that the marriage is lifelong,
Yeah.
and you said that it's indissoluble. Okay, what does that mean?
So indissoluble means that it can't be destroyed, it's forever, and there's nothing that can break it apart. Once it's there, it's until death.
So,
So
when a couple in a marriage ceremony makes the vow until death do us apart, it literally means until death do us apart. So once one of the spouses dies, that's when the marriage ceases.
Okay, perfect. And that's different from other denominations in Christianity, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, because in other Christian denominations, like even within the Orthodox, for example, they allow divorce and remarriage. But within the Catholic Church, when it comes to marriages, it's literally up until one of the death of the spouses.
That's right.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And so, order towards the good of the spouses. So what does that mean? Order towards the good of the spouses.
So St. Thomas Aquinas actually defines love as willing the good of the other. So basically what that means, it's the giving of oneself to another person to create that one flesh. And that kind of links back to agape love.
Yes, so agape love is the love most commonly seen in the New Testament. It was shown by our Lord himself on the cross. It's the most distinctive form of Christian love, and it's used often to describe the love of the persons of the Trinity, and also the love which Jesus commanded his followers to have for one another. Agape love is selfless love, so it's not seeking to gain something in a sense, or it's not seeking to assist one in gaining an advantage over someone, but it's only there to benefit and serve the other person.
Okay, that's interesting. So, sacrificial love, this and that kind of goes against the current, because a lot of people, they think that marriage, there's always going to be something good that's going to be, that somebody can get out of it. So like a lot of people, they think of marriage, when they look at it these days, they look at it from a superficial sense. So for example, I'm going to get married only if I have these certain emotions, or if I get these certain feelings, or if he makes me feel good. I'm going to marry him if he has money, or if he's rich, or if he's popular, or if he's famous. How is that different to like Christian agape love?
Well, in our society today, just to touch on what you were saying, often marriage is viewed as two people getting together to live their best life, to go on holidays, to earn as much money as they can, and it's, I guess, often seen from a very selfish perspective.
Yep.
True Christian marriage is for the good of the other person, and of course, for the act of procreation is a part of it, and the education of the subsequent children as well. So it's a selfless act. It's not there for, in a sense, personal gain or advantage. It's to glorify God and to obviously love your partner, until death do you part.
Okay.
And it also links back to Jesus' death on the cross. So when we look at marriage, it's a reflection or a mirror of the sacrifice that Jesus gave on the Mount of Mount Calvary.
Okay.
So when we look at agape love, we look at that example, that specific example of Jesus dying for us, purely to save us, and so that we can be reunited with Him. So that reunion between God and man.
Okay.
Yep.
So when we look at love, for example, and how important this role is within a Christian marriage, sacrifice and love go hand in hand with each other. Yes. How important do you think is that sacrificial element or that nature when people are looking at getting married, that they need to think sacrifice? Is that important?
Definitely.
And how important is it, do you think?
Oh, to me, it's probably one of, if not the most important aspect of the marriage, because often in marriages, the husband and the wife, they'll go through difficult times together and they will need to sacrifice. There's going to be times in the marriage where, the emotions aren't good, okay, that there's bad emotions occurring, and basically the spouses need to take up their cross and obviously, perform an act of sacrifice. Marriage, you probably hear it from married. I'm not married yet, hopefully next year, God willing, but I'm not married yet. And you hear it from married people, often there's a lot of sacrifice involved.
Yeah.
If you want it to be rosy all the time, that's not what a marriage is. It's impossible.
It's not a realistic picture of what marriage is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way that movies and TV shows and magazines and that they portray marriage to be, it's probably one of the reasons, because people are getting educated in and through the media, it's probably one of the reasons why so many people get divorced.
Well, yeah, if you look at celebrities, how long do a lot of celebrity marriages last for?
Yeah.
Because it's all based off this materialistic view of what marriage is, and it's not right.
Okay, awesome. All right, so on to the next question, because I was throwing a couple of curveball ones at you. What makes a marriage valid?
So there's three basic.
Okay.
So
there's three basic requirements for it. So the couple must be capable of being married. So what that means is that there can be no obstacles between the man and the woman. So, for example, they can't be married they can't be married and get married again. Okay. So there can't be any obstacles between the man or the woman while preparing for marriage.
Yeah.
The second one is
the couple
consent.
need to give their consent.
Yep.
So it has to be an act of their own free will, and they need to give and accept one another in order to establish the marriage. They can't be coerced into the marriage, either I guess through fear or monetary gain. It has to be an act of the will, and the consent needs to be mutual.
So I think it's called the 3 F's. So free, faithful, and fruitful.
In order for it to be a valid marriage.
Yeah. Okay.
And if there's anything lacking in either of those three, then that could lead to an invalid marriage. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And there's one more thing, Michael. They must follow the canonical form for marriage. So what that means is that they must be married within the church, and they must agree with all Catholic Church teachings when agreeing to get married within the church.
Yeah, and observing canonical form also means that, and this is it's not so much recent, but it came about after the 15th century, after the Council of Trent, where canonical form means that it needs to be in the presence of a priest and 2 witnesses.
That's right, yep.
However, it wasn't always like that, because what ended up happening in the early church or before the 15th century, there were these things that were known as Cladestone Marriages. And what's a Cladestone marriage? The Cladestone marriage was when husbands and wives, or men and women, they got together, they fell in love, and then they eloped. And it wouldn't be in the presence of anyone. They would just say that they were married.
Yep.
But the reason why that was such a bad thing, and the reason why the church needed to create this canonical form in order to regulate marriages, was because now you had people who were going around saying that they were married, but there was no proof. So then if this man, for example, wanted to go and marry someone else, he could have easily just said, no, I was never married to her to begin with.
Okay.
So you had a lot of opportunity for women to be taken advantage of. And even if they ended up with children and so on and so forth, it made for very bad situations. So what the church said was, in order to regulate marriages, they said from now on, and this was after the Council of Trent, they said they need to observe canonical form. So it needs to be in the presence of a priest as well as witnesses. But what's interesting though is also that with the Maronite and the Latin Rite churches, because you guys are Maronite,
Yes.
In order for the marriage to be valid, in the Latin Rite, it's different from the Maronite Church. Do you guys know how?
No, can you?
Okay, so within the Latin Rite of the Church, in order for the marriage to be valid, the husband and the wife, they confect the sacrament on each other. When they say the words "I do," that's the form.
Oh, yeah.
They become married there.
Yep.
But within the Maronite Church, it's the blessing of the priest that kind of effectuates the sacraments, that validates it. Sorry guys if I'm using some complicated words here. All right, so let's have a look at some other questions here so we can continue. Why is it a sacrament? So why is marriage a sacrament? Who'd like to answer that one?
So I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, go
So
for it.
first of all, it's important to define what a sacrament is. So a sacrament is an outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. So it's often a visible sign, or it is a visible sign of God's, I guess, the invisible nature, I guess, of God that we can't see. So, for example, the example is we can talk about baptism. In baptism, a baby or an adult, of course, is immersed in water, and that symbolizes the washing away of original sin. And it's a visible sign, but then the invisible grace obviously comes down upon that person. So when we talk about the sacrament of marriage, we're talking about a sacrament between two baptized persons, and it shows that the couple's relationship expresses this unbreakable bond of love, okay? Not only between themselves, but also between God. We can make a link there to the Eucharist. Christ instituted the Eucharist as a visible sign, a continuing sign of his sacrifice. And a marriage is a sacrament in itself. It's a continuing sign of God's grace.
Yeah, awesome. So also, when it comes to it being a sacrament, an important thing, when I got married, I had marriage classes with my priest, and he said that one of the main reasons why two people get married, or the main reasons why you and your wife are going to get married, is because you're going to get each other to heaven.
Yes.
Okay, and St. Paul's going to be talking about this later on when he speaks about how the unfaithful or the unreligious husband will be saved by his religious wife and vice versa. So what he speaks about is that your job when you guys get married is that the husband and the wife are going to try to get each other to heaven. Mm-hmm. And that's what it, and so when Christ instituted marriage as a sacrament, he gives them now grace, and he gives them this ability or this grace for them to be able to get each other to heaven. But they also need this grace in order for them not only to be able to raise their children, but in order for them to be able to raise citizens, future citizens of heaven.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what the children become within this union. All right, so it's interesting because like a lot of people they're like, okay, so what is grace? So grace is like a supernatural help that God gives us in order to make us, to instill and in order to promote good virtues within us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we need grace in order to get to heaven because we want to do good things, we want to live, we want good actions, we want to be virtuous people, we want to get to heaven. So ways that we can get grace are things like doing what people ask us to do, praying rosaries, going to mass, receiving the sacraments. But even within marriage though, the interesting thing about marriage is that if a husband is sick and his wife looks after him, she gets grace from that.
Yes.
So that's a permanent grace. And if the wife is at home looking after the children and they're driving her crazy while husband's at work and she's feeding them and bathing them, but she's doing that for the good of the marriage and for the love of the marriage, she's actually getting grace from that. So the beautiful thing about marriage is that because it's a sacrament, everything that the husband and wife do within the marriage gives them grace.
Yes. Permanently,
always. It's a really amazing thing. Mm-hmm. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on with regards to that, with regards to the validity of marriage?
Yeah, just in regards to, not so much the validity, but it was interesting you noted that the primary role, I guess, or a major role of the marriage is for the man to get his wife to heaven and the wife to get her husband to heaven. Yeah. I actually found out in the Maronite Rite when I was doing my marriage classes, the reason why we're given a crown at our marriage ceremony is it's symbolic of a crown that's going to be there for us, in heaven. So it's, the church actually takes the crown back after the marriage ceremony, and, the priest actually made a joke. He said, it's not because the church is a bit tired and they don't want to give you the crown. It's because it's symbolic of the crown actually going up to heaven.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually, it's going to be there for you at the end of your lives, God willing, if, both spouses get to heaven. So
yeah, that's right. Because St. Paul also talks about the faithful and the baptized, is that we are a royal priesthood as well. So even ourselves as baptized Christians, we serve, and marriage is one of the sacraments at the service of communion. It's one of the sacraments.
Yep.
And so because we now, when we're baptized, we take on this ministerial priesthood where we become visible signs to the world of Christ's love for us. Okay, we also receive, the crowning is also a sign that we receive that royal dignity as well, which is a very good thing. Now, so does Christ speak about marriage in the Gospels?
He does. I'm happy to read the verse.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So where's the first one?
So Matthew 19, verses 1 to 6. So now when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. So they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder."
Okay, interesting. All right, so what's the context here? So when our Lord is speaking in Matthew's Gospel here, in the Gospel of Matthew, he goes from Galilee, and the Pharisees, they come up to him. So they come up to him and they ask him, is it lawful to divorce one's wife? Now, they asked him at the Jordan River. Now, we were speaking about this earlier.
Yeah.
Pharisees are dirty, they're tricky. Okay, so why are they specifically raising this question? Is it because they genuinely wanted to know whether it was lawful to divorce one's wife? What did the Pharisees try to do? Well, they wanted to trap him. Yeah. But why did they specifically ask him at the Jordan River about this question about marriage?
So it goes back to John the Baptist. So John the Baptist was, he actually called out King Herod at the time, and King Herod was having an illicit relationship. And what ended up happening was later on King Herod, because John the Baptist had challenged King Herod, I'm not going to go into the whole biblical story, he ended up having his head chopped off in the end. And basically, when Christ was at the Jordan River, it was a very symbolic place, because that was where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And
also it was where John the Baptist had challenged Herod about his not just illicit relationship, but he had divorced his wife to marry Herodias, and she was really embarrassed because he had called Herod out on that, and so she asked for John the Baptist's head. So the Pharisees were thinking, Jesus, like at the Jordan, you know what happens here to John. Let's see what you say about marriage.
Sure.
And so then what ends up happening here is he goes, and what does Jesus say? He goes, have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female? Now, Melissa, who's he quoting there when he says he who made them in the beginning made them male and female? So this reference to in the beginning, Genesis, okay? And what does God say in Genesis? In the beginning, he made them male and female. So a mother and a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two become
one flesh.
They become one flesh. Okay, so that's very interesting. So what is Jesus saying about marriage here?
So Jesus is actually returning marriage back to what God intended it to be in the book of Genesis. So, we have Adam and Eve created in that state of marriage. So when we talk about, I guess, the unbreakable union of the spouses, we have to go back to Genesis, what God intended from the beginning. So, Jesus affirms that man and woman were created for one another. The woman is literally the flesh of his flesh. We know Eve was created out of the rib of Adam, and she is his equal, his nearest in all things. She's given to him by God as a helpmate, someone that represents God, from whom our own help comes from. So, it's something that is intended to be forever. It's something that's intended to be unbreakable, and obviously ordered towards the good of both spouses, and then of course for the procreation of children. Now, the reason why I want to bring up the procreation of children is because the natural unitive act between a man and a woman, the sexual act, is naturally ordered towards procreation. So children actually come about as a result of this love, this unitive act. So, and I might be going a bit off topic here,
no, it's
but
fine.
It's good.
It is a very important part of the marriage, and I just wanted to just quickly elaborate on that.
Yes.
Sorry.
What were
That
you
also
gonna say?
links back to when he says they are no longer two but one. So it refers to the conjugal relationship between the man and the woman. What that means is it's that sexual relationship between the man and the woman after they to kind of consummate their marriage, to make it complete.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very important for us to understand that it needs to happen for the marriage to be completed and to be kind of sealed. That's the word I'm looking for. All right.
Well, the Latin term for that, there's two words. It's called ratum et consummatum. So ratum means for it to be ratified, the marriage to be ratified. So then that usually happens within the church when they pronounce the words of the form.
Yep.
Do you take X to be your lawfully wedded, and so on and so forth. But what ends up happening is that marriage is ratified, but it's not consummated yet. So consummated is when they get into the when they have the conjugal act together on the wedding night, and it's when that conjugal act takes place, that's when the marriage becomes indissoluble and it becomes consummated.
Yep.
And that's when it's unbreakable. And that's when our Lord says, so what God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
Yep.
So even the church declares that she has no authority and no right to be able to break the union, the lawful union, indissoluble union between a man and a woman. And also, like a lot of people, especially when it comes to this whole issue of same-sex marriage, for example, they think, well, why can't a man and a man get married? And a lot of the time, it's because they don't understand what it means by complementarity, or the complementarity of the sexes. So with the complementarity of the sexes, for example, husbands and wives, or men and women, they complement each other. What does that actually mean? It means that the husband has something that the woman needs in order to make her complete, in order to complement her, and the woman has something that the husband needs in order to complete her, or not so much to complete her, but in order to complement something. And what's that? It's the act of giving life. New and permanent life. So in order for a new life to be born, it can only happen with the reciprocal relationship, with the bodily union between a man and a woman. Because a husband is not asexual, a man is not asexual, neither is a woman, whereby they can have offspring upon their own. The husband needs the woman, and the woman needs the man. So if you have a look at, if you look at biology and you look at their reproductive organs, you notice that the male reproductive system is ordered towards depositing life, or depositing something into a place in which life is going to be generated, and that's within the reproductive system of the woman. So when you have a look at a male and a female reproductive system, they're complementary. It means that they work only they only work together.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, and that's something that a lot of people need to understand, when they need to understand, well, why can't marriage exist between a man and a man? Because when we look at the goods of marriage and we look at what makes marriage real, okay, one of them is that it's ordered. Their bodies are ordered. It means they have a direction, their ends, just the way that the eyes are ordered towards sight, and the nose is ordered towards smell, and the tongue is ordered towards taste. The reproductive systems are ordered towards life. And so marriage itself is ordered towards procreation.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah? Okay? Now, was there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on in Matthew's gospel, or did you want to move on from there?
Just in regards to just one little thing, it says in the gospel that the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Why did Moses command that some a man could give a certificate of divorce to his wife and put her away. So how come in the Old Testament divorce was an option? And Jesus says to them, for your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. So, you know, he's bringing that link back to how marriage was intended to be from creation. But the question is, what do we mean by hardness of heart? So during that time, you know, from what I'm aware of, and you might be able to help me with this, Michael, but in the Old Testament period, basically there wasn't, I guess, something that could stop a man from committing an evil act against his wife, you know, maybe getting her killed, for example, and then going and marrying somebody else.
So what happened was, so when the Pharisees were asking him, he goes, well, how come Moses gave us a bill of divorce, allowed them to have a bill of divorce? Well, Jesus said, for your hardness of hearts, meaning that in the Old Testament with the Israelites, when they were wandering away from Egypt, they still had a lot of bad habits that the Egyptians had. And when it meant hardness of heart, they were evil people. So what ended up happening, and you're right, is that the Israelites, if they knew that they weren't allowed to divorce their wives, and they knew that marriage was until death, they were like, oh, really? I can't marry someone else unless she's dead. So they would go and they would plan to have her killed, or they'd have her stoned, or they'd wrongly accuse her. Because even in the Old Testament, I think the testimony of a woman was worth either that, or the testimony of 2 or 3 women was the same as the testimony of a man. I think that was within rabbinic tradition. So all a man had to do was to say that my wife cheated on me, and they ended up stoning her. Okay, so because Moses wanted to protect the Israelite women, he said, I would rather you write a bill of divorce than for your husbands to try to plan to kill you. But Jesus says in the beginning it wasn't so. So you're supposed to love each other, and that's the reason why a bill of divorce was written for the Israelites. But we know that marriage is indissoluble, okay, and there was no excuse then. So do you want to move on to St. Paul now? Okay.
I'm happy to. Do you want to?
Yeah, all right, so let's go. So what does St. Paul say about marriage?
Okay, so St. Paul in his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 31 and 32. So he says, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery, or in another word, mysterion, is a profound one, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. Okay, so what he's saying here, so St. Paul confirms this, okay? So he refers to marriage as a mysterion, so in another word, a sacrament. And how we defined sacrament before was that it is a visible sign of an invisible reality. And we used baptism as the example. I'm not going to go into it again. But basically, St. Paul makes that connection with that it is a sacrament. And another connection that he makes the link between Christ and the church, okay? And the three things, or the 3 links that he makes, is that it's joyful. All right, so there is a joyful and loving union between the husband and the wife, just as there was a loving union between Christ and the church when he died on that cross. Okay, when he died on the cross on Calvary. Then we spoke about then there's sacrifice. So we already spoke about sacrifice, how the couples need to sacrifice things from each other's lives in order to make the marriage work. Okay, so giving up their lives unto death. Okay, for each other unto death. And then you've got fruitfulness. So fruitfulness in the fact that they need to both grow in holiness together, as we said, to get each other to heaven. And we also need to understand that they have to be accepting of children. Okay, a marriage does not work if a couple is not accepting of children. They shouldn't be married at the end of the day if they don't want children.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you brought up that point, because another word for marriage is in the Latin word that people use for marriage, which they don't know, is matrimony. And it's a bit of an old word that's kind of gone into disuse
Isn't
now.
That what it's called, the Sacrament of Matrimony?
Yeah, so it's the Sacrament of Matrimony. And I think a lot of people don't know that the word matrimony comes from a Latin word, mater. And the word mater means mother. So marriage is the process by which a man helps or facilitates a woman from being a woman to being a mother.
Wow.
Okay? So that's what matrimony is. So if people understood that matrimony is the process or the becoming of a mother or motherhood, they would understand that children are probably the primary goal and the primary end of marriage.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that if 2 people do not have the ability to have children, doesn't mean that their marriage isn't valid. Okay, but it does mean that when two people get married, one of the most important things that makes the marriage valid is that the husband and the wife need to, at the time of the marriage, when the church asks them, are you willing to have children? Are you open to life? And to bring them up according to the teachings of the church? When they respond, I do, it means that they're making a vow and a pledge before the church saying, yes, I'm going to be open to life.
Yep.
And so what's interesting is that one thing that can invalidate a marriage is if a husband and a wife, when they enter into the marriage, they go and they say, yes, we will, because they just want to get married and because everybody's watching, but deep down, they're actually lying.
Yeah.
And they're saying, no, we never plan on having kids. That's actually called defective consent. So defective consent, or it's actually probably simulated consent. Simulated consent is when what they're saying is not what their intentions are. So what they're saying is not what they're verbalizing is not what their intentions are.
Yeah.
So they're saying, yes, I do, but they're actually saying, no, I'm not. Okay, and the reason why sometimes simulated consent is invalidates marriage is because, and why people do it is because I've invited 500 people to my wedding, or now during coronavirus 150 or 100 people, okay? And because for that reason, I'm I've paid for the wedding, I've paid for the honeymoon. The priest is here, he's throwing this question at me, even though they should have had marriage classes, but I don't know what happens. Or maybe they were just umming and ahhing. And
I'm pretty sure they go through.
Well, they do, but I don't know whether they're actually listening at the time, or whether they just want to make sure that they get married.
Maybe they're just lost in the false perception of what marriage is.
Maybe, you never know, or maybe the priest doesn't tell them. There could be a variety of different reasons.
Okay.
But so what ends up happening is that if they end up later on wanting to get a divorce, for example, or wanting to separate, or wanting to get an annulment, and we'll get into that a little bit later, simulated consent actually invalidates the marriage, because what they were saying, they weren't giving. They were actually lying when they said those words, and so that's called an impediment to marriage, because they weren't expressing consent properly.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else that you guys wanted to add to that? Another thing that I was thinking of as well is that, and I was reading, I think it was St. John Paul II that said this. St. John Paul II said something very beautiful. He said that children are a sign that husbands and wives, or that men and women, they have a yearning desire that they want to live forever. And so because men and women, they want to live forever, a way that they can kind of make that happen is by having children.
Yes.
So they live on and on through their children. And that's the reason why one of the goods of marriage is that it's permanence. So husband and wives, when they come together, one of the reasons why it's important that marriage is indissoluble and it lasts forever is because they're going to be bringing new life into the world, and that new life isn't going to last for a day or a week or a month or a year. It's going to be there. They've come together, they've become one flesh, and they've potentially created a soul. And that soul has an immortal existence, and it's going to live forever. So they've created life that's going to live forever, and hopefully one day be in heaven with God. Wow. So that's very, very important. And Vince, I know that you're going to be getting married soon, so I'm sure they covered all that within your marriage classes.
Definitely. Yeah?
Awesome. Yeah. Guys, thanks very much for coming on the show. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to add at all to this before we wrap it up?
Maybe we can talk a bit about, you mentioned annulments.
Okay, go for it. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So, we often hear the word annulment, and often when it comes up, people think it's something like it's a Catholic divorce.
That's right.
That's far from what it is. So an annulment is, I think it's determined by a tribunal within the church, and basically what it establishes is that there wasn't a valid marriage in the first place. So earlier on in the program, we spoke about some of the conditions, I guess, which need to be met before a man and a woman are to be married. So, of course, they both have to be free. They have to consent. They have to be able to be married.
Yep.
And
it has to be one male, one female.
One male, one female. So there's a few conditions that need to be met. But basically what an annulment presupposes is that these conditions were not met prior to the marriage ceremony.
Or at the marriage, ceremony.
At the marriage ceremony. So,
Yeah.
Mel, would you like to go into a couple of those conditions?
So like the impediments?
Yeah.
So from my understanding, it's a very difficult topic to speak about when we get into that, because
In class?
in class, outside of class, in the real world, like it's when annulments are mentioned,
Yep.
there's always, unless you really understand the conditions, nobody will understand what is valid or what makes an annulment valid.
Yeah.
So
And it's case by case.
Yeah. So from my understanding, for example, excuse me, a woman lies. Sorry.
All good.
A woman lies and she says that she wants children, and then once they get married, she decides to change her mind. From my understanding, you can probably correct me, that's possible grounds for an annulment.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So lying about wanting to have children prior to being married, that's grounds for an annulment.
But also, sorry, were you going to add anything to that?
No, you can go.
No, because another interesting thing is that, for example, if they don't observe canonical form, so like, for example, going to Vegas and having one of those quick marriages in one of those chapels in Vegas, that's not observing canonical form, so that marriage is invalid. Yeah,
so it must be within the church.
That's in order for it to be a valid sacramental marriage.
Yep.
It has to be done within the church. But if they get the permission from the bishop, Catholics can marry non-Catholics.
Okay.
Okay, so it just needs to be, so for a sacramental marriage, it needs to be between two baptized people. But in order for the marriage also to be, it can be a natural marriage. So even two Muslims, for example, or two Buddhists or two atheists, they can have a natural marriage.
Yep.
And it's considered a real marriage. And if they end up getting divorced, for example, and one of them want to marry a Catholic, they actually need to go to a Catholic tribunal in order to get that marriage validated or annulled before they can marry a Catholic spouse. So that's a very interesting thing. So if, let's say, for example, you have a Catholic that wants to marry a non-Catholic, and because like I know that at your school, for example, there's a lot of Assyrian people from the Assyrian Church of the East, and there's probably a lot of marriages, mixed marriages between Chaldeans and Assyrians. So if they were wanting to get married in either one of their churches, they would need to get permission from the bishop.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, and then when the bishop would give permission, or if the Chaldean bishop gave permission, he would give permission to the Chaldean to get married to the Assyrian in either church, and we have to speak, and this is for all Catholics, on the conditions that if they're going to have children, which they should be open to, that they are going to be baptized and raised Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's interesting though is that Catholics and Orthodox can get married. Okay. But the conditions for the Catholic spouse is that the kids have to be baptized Catholic and raised Catholic. But I think the conditions for the Orthodox are that the kids are going to be baptized Orthodox and raised Orthodox.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on in order for those marriages to go ahead. But it seems as though someone's probably giving in or giving way or something.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so in class I get this a lot.
Yeah,
and girls ask, or students ask, I should say, that what happens if the husband or the wife cheats on their spouse?
Yep.
Isn't that grounds for an annulment?
Okay, now it's a case by case scenario, and after this talk, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be because I spoke earlier to Father Gideon.
Yep.
And Father Gideon is a Canon lawyer, and he works in the tribunal. And I asked him some questions.
What's the tribunal?
Well, he works for the tribunal when two people want to apply for an annulment. Mm-hmm. They send their case to the church, and it gets looked at before a tribunal.
Okay. Yep.
And Father Gideon is actually a canon lawyer that works in marriage tribunals, and he looks at these cases. And I asked him a couple of questions with regards to annulment, so we're probably going to be looking at that later on.
Okay.
But from what I understand, it's very case by case.
Okay.
But if I was to give you just off the cuff a simple answer to that question, adultery is not grounds for an annulment. Okay, so if the wife cheats on her husband, all right, that can be grounds for them to want to separate.
Yep.
Because our Lord speaks about it in the Gospels. He says that when he speaks about marriage, he says, except for unchastity. Okay?
Yep.
All right, and that unchastity word is the Greek word porneia.
Porneia.
Yeah, and porneia can mean fornication.
Yep.
Yep.
So fornication can mean that the husband or the wife cheated on each other, they
Yep.
slept with somebody else, and then that's grounds for the separation.
Yep.
But St. Paul goes and says that if a man marries a woman who's been married already, he commits adultery. And if a woman marries a man who's been married before, she commits adultery.
Yes.
Okay? So marriage is permanent. St. Paul understood that. Our Lord understood that. When our Lord's speaking about these exception clauses to when they can separate, he wasn't speaking about them separating and marrying other people. He was speaking about they don't have to live together.
Yes.
So other grounds, other questions that you might get asked is, what if the husband bashes the woman?
Yep.
Or what if or what if they're in a domestic violence situation? That's not grounds for her to stay with him. Okay, just because as Catholics we believe in the indissolubility of marriage.
Yep.
The simple answer would be they probably are still married, but a spiritual advisor or the church would tell her it's probably better that you leave that situation.
Yep.
Okay, for the sake of yourself and your children. Okay, so that's very important as well. But the church also looks at the mental capacity of the individual when they're entering into the sacrament, because one of the important things about this sacrament that makes it valid is that the people themselves, the husband and the wife, they need to give consent to each
Yes.
other. And so they have to have the mental capacity to render the obligations of marriage. So what does that actually mean? So with a husband, for example, if he had deep-seated tendencies of abuse within him, and he had a violent past, he didn't disclose this to his wife, and he's bashed probably every woman that he's ever been with, and he has not dealt with these demons, and he hasn't, from a professional level, seen a psychologist or gotten some form of treatment for it. If he marries that woman, then he continues to be violent with her. It seems as though that he has not been able to have the capacity. He doesn't have the capacity to be married because of his violent state,
Yes.
and that could be grounds for an annulment.
Yes.
Okay, because really, if a man is going to marry a woman and all he's going to do is bash her, it means that he doesn't have the capacity to live a life of love and sacrifice and so on and so forth. Okay, so the church is very loving and very, but very wise as well. And the church uses her reason, and the church understands that if two people are going to be married, they need to understand what marriage is about, but also they need to make sure that they satisfy the goods of marriage.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
For sure.
Any last words? You guys good with that?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
All right,
I had
awesome.
a couple of statistics.
Yeah, go
I
for it.
found.
Yeah, let's go for some stats now.
Just from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So in 2018...
Sorry, what's this relating to?
just marriage in general.
In general, okay, yeah,
So
go
this
for
is
it.
not per se, marriage within the Catholic Church, but marriage in general in Australia.
Yeah.
So in 2018, there were 119,188 marriages. And this was actually an increase from 2017 by about 6,200 marriages. And interestingly, 4 out of 5 marriages were performed by a civil celebrant, so outside the church, which is quite interesting, and it's indicative of the
culture,
the secular culture of today. And there were 49,404 civil divorces granted in Australia.
Out of how many? 100 and...
that was in 2018.
Okay, so it looks like it's just a bit under half.
Yeah.
Wow. So there are a lot of divorces now these days, eh?
Yes.
A lot.
Well, yeah. So I guess what's important to take from that statistic is that if people are wanting to look at marriage,
They have to be serious about it.
They have to be serious, but also marriage is a beautiful thing, and I don't think marriage is more beautiful in and through and explained by the church.
Yes.
Okay, that idea of sacrifice, that idea of love, of permanence, of unity. But it's just that people just need to really understand
The
it.
moment that people take out the sacrificial nature of a marriage, they take the sacrificial nature of a marriage out of the marriage itself, it puts the marriage in great danger. It puts it in grave danger, actually, and You know, this is why we had in 2018 over 49,000 divorces just in Australia alone, and that's a very worrying statistic. And you know, from what we've spoken about today, the Catholic understanding of what marriage is, it's a very solid foundation for what a real marriage is. It is the most solid foundation for a real marriage is because it's true, and it was given to us by God Himself. It's a supernatural kind of thing. So it's something that, you know, we really need to think about, okay? Because we don't want statistics like this occurring, you know,
That's right.
over the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and we just want to make sure that all our audience understand, for those that haven't been married, or the students especially, that when they're looking at marriage or wanting to get married, the first thing that they need to understand is that marriage needs to be selfless. It needs to be about love. It needs to be about what I can contribute to the other person and what they can contribute to me. But also, and most importantly, marriage is about getting your spouse, getting each other to where?
Heaven.
To heaven.
Heaven.
Guys, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
I know it
Michael.
was not so much short notice, but I know it's your first time on the show. Hopefully you guys can join us again for maybe another syllabus or a
Be more than
junior
happy to.
outcome.
Love
Yeah.
to.
Thanks, guys, for being on the show. Big shout out to Mary McKillop at Wakely and their excellent teachers. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to show you some clips from a show that I did with Father Gideon, who is a Canon lawyer, and he works for the Tribunal on Annulments. Tonight we have a very special guest, Father Gideon from St. Jerome's Punchbowl. Father, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
It's great having you. Like, I've known you now for a couple of years, and
A bit more than that.
a bit more than that. And we are talking all things marriage today. And the reason why I decided to get Father Gideon to come on the show with us today is because Father Gideon, although he's a parish priest, and he has been a priest now for
10 years last week.
10 years last week. We celebrated his anniversary. Congratulations, Mabruk.
Thank you.
We're speaking marriage, and people don't know this, but Father has a licentiate, which is like a degree in canon law.
Correct.
And that's from the Gregorian University in Rome.
Correct.
And he's been especially appointed by Bishop Fisher to work for the tribunal, listening to cases with regards to annulments. So we wanted to get Father on the show to speak about your experiences.
Yes.
And just to get a bit of knowledge from you with regards to this most interesting topic. So let's get started. So, Father, can you just, or before we get started on that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in that role?
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for having me on the show. My name is Father Joseph Gideon. I've been a priest for 10 years. Between 2012 and 2015, I was asked to go into further studies, and it turned out to be canon law. And when upon my return at the end of 2015, Archbishop Anthony Fisher asked me to work at the tribunal. Now I love my priesthood, and I accepted the offer. And while I'm 4 days or 6 days parish priest, I'm 1 day working in the marriage tribunal in the Archdiocese of Sydney. And my role varies. Sometimes I'm a case processor. I'll interview people. At other times, I'm an interpreter, and other times I have the title of a defender of the bond of marriage. And that's been going since 2016, 4 years now.
So you've been doing that role for 4 years?
4 years.
So we've heard a couple of interesting terms. So
Yes.
Could you let us know, Father, first of all, the reason why you have your role is because people are coming to the church and they're applying for what's known as annulments.
Correct.
So could you just tell us a little bit about, or tell the audience, what is an annulment?
Okay. The short answer would be annulment is not a divorce, and we need to make that very, very clear. And people, when they come to the tribunal, Catholic tribunal, they seek an annulment thinking it's a divorce, just I apply for it and get it. Mm-hmm. It's not a divorce. An annulment is you look into the marriage before and after, and you establish if there has been any reasons why this contract between the man and the woman has been invalid, has been null, void. And if it's void, that means there hasn't been any marriage. Therefore, the marriage would be declared null.
Okay, so that we understand, an annulment is not a Catholic divorce. It's not a divorce for Catholics.
If a marriage is valid, what God binds in heaven, we cannot separate here on earth.
Okay.
So it's a bond that only be separated through death.
Okay. So when it comes to your experiences at the tribunal, you've mentioned that you're a defender of the bond. Can you just explain briefly what that actually means?
Okay. When, if you like, a plaintiff, that's a person who comes, either the husband or the wife in the marriage, no longer are in the marriage civilly. They've received the decree of absolute nullity and a divorce.
Yep.
They have the right to apply to seek if their marriage in the Catholic Church is null.
Okay.
So they put the marriage, if you like, on trial. And like any other court, if you like, whoever is on trial, whatever is on trial, they have the right to be defended. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the defender of the bond, if you like, if the defense lawyer who looks at the defense, tries to defend the marriage.
Okay. So what you're saying is that if a person wants to seek an annulment, or they want to apply for annulment, they need to be civilly divorced first.
Correct.
Why does the church ask that of the spouse, or why does the church ask that of one of the parties?
It's in a way to eliminate or to make sure that there is no chance that the two would come back together.
So there's no hope of reconciliation.
Correct. Okay. Correct.
And it just makes things easier as well. So this is something that you've organised.
But also, I think for legal reasons, not only they need to be civilly divorced, but they have to have all their court issues or solved, and no hanging issues.
Okay.
Before that, they while there are still problems like disputes, they can't apply to the
tribunal.
Yes.
And so when they put in an application, because they want to see that to see whether there's grounds for an annulment. Why is it, or what are some of the reasons that you've heard of or that you've experienced? Why is it that people they seek an annulment? Why is it that they want the church to see that their marriage never existed?
Because people would want to be would want to enter another marriage, another relationship.
Okay, and they want to be married within the
Catholic
Church.
The church. Correct.
And so when it comes to this declaration of nullity that the church examines, the person who is looking at getting this annulment, when they come and they make an application, your job is to look at the marriage and to see whether that was a valid marriage or that was validly contracted at the time. And how would
I would rephrase that?
Yep.
Marriage enjoys the favor of the law.
Yep.
Marriage is always presumed valid. So you're not checking if the marriage is valid. You're trying to find any problems that may have made the marriage null.
Made the marriage null.
The contract null.
Okay.
Yep.
And in your experience, what are some of the reasons, or what are some impediments to marriage that would make them invalid?
They vary. I think there is the most common ones probably that come up is not fully understanding the rights and the obligations within marriage. Sometimes people marry because it's a beautiful idea. It's because wanting to be with someone else.
Okay.
Sometimes the family influence that one of the spouses were not able to or they're very codependent on their own family, and they could not separate themselves to form the home of their own. That
Oh, wow.
yeah, so that could be one of the reasons. Adultery, but that's to be understood not after that. Like if the person was unfaithful before or during the courtship, before the marriage, and they've probably lied to their spouses.
Yep.
There would be not having complete freedom to enter the marriage.
So being forced
or coerced.
And that's happened?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
And it doesn't have to be a physical coercion. It can be monetary or financial or psychological?
Correct.
Okay.
It could be, there's many reasons. One of them would also be not wanting to have children.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned, the goods of marriage is
Life and children.
Procreation.
Yep.
So, and that's, if you like, a prerequisite for the Catholic Church. So if you're entering marriage intending not to have children, that renders the marriage, the contract invalid.
And what do you look at when you're looking at the when you're looking at the process? When you're in, let's say you're interviewing an applicant.
Yes.
Do you only look at their life now? Do you look at their life at the time of the marriage? How far back do you go to get some sort of a judgment and to get some sort
right
of an
to the beginning?
understanding?
So you ask the applicant about their own family, their childhood, their education, their career, until the courtship.
Yep.
And then the same sets of questions about their spouse. And then you ask about the courtship, and then you ask about the engagement, and then you ask about the wedding itself and the preparation for the wedding, and then what happened after.
Okay.
Okay. And that covers the whole story, if you like.
Yep.
And then if the defendant decides to take part of the process, you ask them the same questions. And that gives you a clearer view on what's happening.
Okay.
It's kind of a cross-examination. And then both the plaintiff and the defendant have the right to bring in witnesses. And the witnesses come and they get asked the similar questions. And even that gives you a clearer view for the defender of the bond and also for the judge to make a judgment on the case.
Okay. And why is it important when you're looking at these cases? Why is it important to go back to the beginning? Like, what are you looking for?
Most of the time, to probably maybe to establish that one of the spouses did have an impediment that makes the marriage invalid.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, impediments can be something like maturity, the incapacity to render, the obligations of marriage.
Yes.
Okay. Something like if a person has an unhappy marriage, okay, and they just want to get a divorce, but they're just unhappy, or their spouse is not sexually attracted to them anymore, and they don't want to sleep with them anymore, for example. Is that grounds for an annulment?
Can you say that on live television?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Okay.
When people enter marriage and it's a valid sacramental marriage, it's in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, in rich and poor, until death does them part.
Okay. And what about, like, let's say two people get married and they're both open to life, they're in love, and the wife or the husband didn't know that they couldn't have kids, and they start trying for a year or two, and they realize, the husband realizes that the wife, she's infertile, and he doesn't want to be with her anymore. Is that grounds for an annulment?
Definitely not.
Okay. And why not?
Because first, there's no deception, and when they enter the marriage, again, in sickness and in health. And if the person is unable, that's a type of sickness.
Yeah.
So you stick by them. And that's part of the marriage life.
Okay. So just because a person's infertile, that doesn't render the marriage invalid?
Absolutely not.
Okay. When it comes to, let's say, when it comes to lies, okay, let's say the
deception, if the deception happened before the marriage was contracted,
Yep.
it can be grounds for annulment. I just would like to emphasize the point that marriage enjoys the favor of the law.
always.
You can't just if someone is into that marriage and the marriage is fine, they shouldn't think that their marriage is invalid.
Okay. And here's another thing that I wanted to ask you. Prenuptial agreements?
They invalidate the marriage automatically.
Automatically.
Correct.
So if two people want to get married and one of them wants to sign they want to sign a prenuptial agreement because they want to preserve their assets or for whatever reason, that completely invalidates the marriage.
Do you know why, Michael?
I do, but I want you to tell me. Yeah.
Okay. Marriage is compared to the marriage between Christ and the church.
Yep.
And when Christ died on the cross, suffered, died, and resurrected, first, the incarnation, his obedience, becoming a servant in obedience to God the Father, and undergoing passion and death, and then resurrection. God gave himself completely for the sake of the church, sacrificed everything about himself. And marriage is compared to that. So when husband and wife are contracting marriage, according to the words of St. Paul, that the husband should treat his wife like Christ treats the church, and vice versa. And that means give oneself completely, everything about them to their spouse.
What are your thoughts on mixed marriages?
They can work.
They can work?
Yes,
yeah?
definitely.
Okay. Between, let's say, for example, a Catholic and an Orthodox, or between a Catholic and a Protestant, or between a Catholic and a non-Catholic, do you ever get situations in which one of them provides an impediment to the other of being able to live out their faith? Like, for example, you get two spouses, they wanting to get married. One of them says, yeah, I'll come with you to church, I'll take the kids to church. And then all of a sudden they're married a year or two in. I'm not bothered, you take the kids yourself. I don't want to go. And then eventually maybe even sometimes they're like, no, I don't want the kids to go either, you go by yourself.
When a young couple presents themselves to the church to be married in the Catholic Church, the fact that they're asked to be married in the Catholic Church, one of the conditions, and they agree upon that and they sign on it, is that they would raise children according to the God's law and His church, and they sign on this.
Yeah.
So the assumption is that the kids will be, including the non-Catholic party, they have to sign on that.
Okay.
So that's to be agreed upon right from the beginning.
Okay.
Otherwise, they can go if they want. They don't want to get somewhere else, get married somewhere else.
Okay. So what I was going to ask is, so regardless of whether it's a non-Catholic husband marrying a Catholic wife, or a non-Catholic wife marrying a Catholic husband, the non-Catholic has to agree that the children are going to be raised in the church. If they are
getting married in the Catholic Church.
In the Catholic Church. Yes. And that's always the case.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
if
never a case.
They were lying,
yeah.
And the marriage broke down, that could be deception and then a ground for annulment.
So it's never a case of, no, within our culture, we follow what the husband does. So if the husband's this, then I'm going to follow him to his church. The fact
that they come to the Catholic Church, the church is very clear.
Okay.
Again, it's in the prenuptial inquiry.
Yep.
The questions are asked there, and the person...
they're very clear?
They're very clear, and they need to ask the question, their response by yes or no. And they need to sign.
Okay. Oh, so they actually sign,
yes,
do they?
The prenuptial
agreement. Prenuptial questionnaire or
paperwork.
Or paperwork.
Yeah.
But does the church see, or in your opinion, do you think that there's any sort of a danger in a Catholic seeking marriage with a non-Catholic, because they will have different views on the obligations that
But
are
it
needed?
would be the same if a non-Catholic being married in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on the person and how firm they are in their faith.
Okay.
And how strong in their faith. So, you hear stories that people convert after so many years of marriage to the other spouse religion. So that these things do happen in the Catholic Church or in either other churches or religions.
So it could be an opportunity for conversion, or it could be an opportunity for grace. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now,
as in to convert, to have the other person convert to the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Yes.
What kind of advice would you give to people based upon your experiences in dealing in the tribunal with people that are wanting to get married, or people that are let's start with people that are wanting to get married.
To have a stronger relationship with Christ.
Okay.
Because that can solve any issues.
You believe that it can solve solve any issues?
Absolutely.
Have you seen things turn around for people? Have you seen marriages that looked as though that they were heading down this path, that almost looked like no hope of reconciliation, and then they put their faith in Christ more, or they devoted themselves to prayer more, they went to the sacraments more, and then things just changed for them?
Well, sadly, that most people turn to their faith when they are having problems.
Okay.
And sometimes when they take their faith seriously, Christ changes their lives. Miraculously, they become, less selfish, more giving, more attentive to the needs of others, and that can impact the marriage in a good way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as well, for people that have that are in probably marriages at the moment that they're not too happy, or they're looking at a way out, what kind of advice would you like to give to people that are in these situations? What kind of practical advice would you like to give?
Pastoral advice is that a divorce can fix one problem, but it does create more problems, other problems.
Okay.
But having said this, if a person is living in one of the spouse's conditions that are of a threat to their own lives, the sanctity of life is very important. They need to protect their own lives.
Okay. So it's not save the marriage at all costs. If there's a danger to one of the spouses,
correct,
and they need to get out, don't feel bad about it.
Correct.
It's important that
we need to use our minds.
Yep.
Be very reasonable in the way we use our minds.
Okay,
yep.
Because unfortunately, like you've probably heard in marriages that people can use probably manipulation on their spouses, or they can abuse them, not only just physically but mentally as well. And some people feel that they're trapped. What kind of advice would you give to people that would be in those situations that just seek help, seek guidance?
Don't bottle things.
Yep.
Within yourself. Speak up. Go to your local priest. Go to your counselor.
Yep.
But it's very important to speak to people whom they trust, and they can help them with their situation.
Yeah. Okay. And what kind of advice would you give to friends of people who might be in or family members that might be the type of people that like to get involved a lot in their children's marriages, or in the marriages of their brothers or sisters? What kind of advice would you like to give to them?
Is that if you know of anyone who's having problems in their marriage, be sure that you listen to them, but try not to give advice, especially if you haven't heard the other side of the story, because your advice can be cause damage.
Yeah.
But always encourage the person as you listen to them to speak to professionals.
Speak to professionals. Yeah.
I'd just would like to say one thing is that the last canon in the Code of Canon Law is about the Church's concern is for the salvation of souls.
Yep.
So the Church does whatever she does for the salvation of souls and leading people into heaven. And part of that is uncovering the truth, because the truth sets us free. And since Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, so through him we can find, we'll be able to find the truth.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much, Father, for being on the show. That was great. I got some great information and some great insight as well. I hope the audience enjoyed that as well. Guys, thank you very much for watching. This is Couch Catechism. I'm your host, Michael Obeid. God bless and keep the faith.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Russo, and I'm here with the team of Verasis Media. What's fantastic about this initiative is that it's an Australian-based catechetical resource. In other words, it's our Catholics right here at home who are teaching us about Jesus Christ in an uncompromised way. We're learning the fullness of the truth and nothing less. We're also supporting our local priests, nuns, and laymen and women, and empowering them to be educators in the faith, to be evangelizers. So by supporting this initiative, you're supporting the church in our country. So get on board and support Veracious Media.